So here today, we're going to talk about navigating the realm of community organizing in today's world. A lot of things have changed over time. A lot of great things have been added in to help us better do our work. And so as we continue to focus on how do we reach our community, we have to take into account some of these nuances and some of these ways that we can do a larger reach and also learn more along the way. So before we get into this, I do want to give a little bit of an overview of who we are. So we are with the Community Coalition Alliance. We're based in Florida, and we are a coalition of coalitions. Our mission is to serve as that collective voice for our community coalitions, as well as our various partners that we work with, to work towards that health and wellness for all Floridians. We bring together coalitions from across various communities, urban and rural, similar and different, and we try to bring on that opportunity to have those leveraged efforts, ideas, and opportunities to do great work. The work that we do here is to be able to work together to create that healthier, safe environment in which all of our citizens can thrive. And so with that, we have this opportunity to really work with a lot of fantastic organizations that have shared with us lessons learned, shared with us success stories, shared with us great information and data collected so we can look at that as a whole picture. As we have moved through and expanded as an organization, we've been able to do a number of different things. We have that opportunity to create this forum of partnerships so that we can bring involvement and participation from various parts of our states. We have that opportunity to have a membership alliance where our various coalitions and partners come together to come up with brainstorming opportunities, come up with ways in which to overcome challenges and barriers, share success stories, and really be able to learn from one another. We also have been fortunate to have opportunities to provide funding and oversight for some of our members. We do a lot of work in the training and technical assistance arena to build up our workforce. Our team is the lead SAPS trainers for Florida, where we work to bring in the 4-day evidence-based program to be able to really talk about the science behind prevention and what it is that looks like, how we use the data to drive our decisions, how we rely on the research to be able to inform those decisions, and how do we go through the things that we're going to talk about here today in navigating the mobilization of communities. We also do a lot of engagements with various partners. Our key partners here in our state include the Florida National Guard, Drug Demand Reduction Outreach Unit. We also work very closely with our Florida HIDAs. We have 3 HIDAs in our state, and we collaborate with all 3 of them. We also have opportunities to collaborate with other organizations that are multi-county to be able to leverage some of the work we do. We partner a lot with the recovery community organizations so that we can really make sure we have that larger reach. So that's a little bit about who we are and what we bring to the table. And here today, that's what we want to do, is talk about the things that we've seen as success. This here just gives you kind of a visual of who our members are across our state in Florida. However, in addition to those that are formalized members, we actually work with coalitions and partners throughout our state. And so today we're going to bring that information and share it with all of you. There's a couple of objectives that we're going to cover here and give you some great examples as to what that looks like and what that means. We're going to describe how to assess community norms and behavioral health priorities. We're going to talk about explaining how to assess communities' readiness so that we can address some of the issues that come up. We're going to explain how a community can build that momentum and engagement to enhance that capacity. And then we're going to finish it up by understanding the importance of that consistent and meaningful engagement so that we can sustain the efforts that we are working on. Because nobody wants to work on something that's going to be just short term. You want to work on things that can continue to help and build up our community and create that safer and healthier community for our community partners to be able to thrive in and help those that live there. Everything we do is guided through the strategic prevention framework. It is that public health approach that really helps us to ensure that we're relying on the data and the evidence and the research. It is what we apply to no matter what work we're doing, what arena, whether it is related to substance use, whether it's related to mental health, or whether we're looking at other areas in our community that we want to focus in on. This framework is guided by evidence, it's informed by the research, it addresses that cultural awareness throughout the process that we're working through, and it helps to keep that sustainability in the forefront of what we're working on. It follows through that strategic plan to ensure that we have things that are measurable. It ensures that we have timelines and ensures that we have identified leads for the efforts that we do. And then it helps us to assess along the way. It's really important that we look at things not just at the end, but throughout the process, so we can figure out if we need to do any of those pivoting moments along the way, or if we need to make some adjustments that will help to ensure the success of the work that we do. As we go through this presentation, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to type it into the chat. If it's something related to the slide, we want to make sure we address that as we go through. If it's something that's going to come up a little bit later, we may say, well, let's hold that thought and we'll get to it in the next few slides. But I also don't want you to lose their train of thought on a question that comes up if we're mentioning something. So before we kick off, I would love to hear from all of you, and please use the chat feature there on what community organizing means to you. What does that look like? What do you think of? Whether it's, you know, a phrase, a keyword, go ahead and share what that looks like for all of you. One of the things that we love to do when we do presentations and webinars is you're going to learn from things that we're sharing, but we also learn a lot from those that are in the audience. And there may be things that you found that has been successful in some of this. And so this gives us an opportunity to share with everybody.
So Kathleen, I am seeing a lot of collaboration. I'm going to try to keep up because they're coming in hot. I see empowering others, challenging. Yeah, it can be really challenging and rewarding at the same time. A lot of engagement, a lot of meetings, events, collaboration, grassroots, shared goals. Again, collaboration, engagement, working across turfs and communities to increase community health. Pooling resources, isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Harnessing community expertise, absolutely. Some more collaborating. I love this one. Involving residents and those most impacted. Absolutely.
Oh, I love that. That is such a critical piece to that. Well, it sounds like we have a lot of the same ways to describe what that community organizing is with that collaboration. And we're going to get into what exactly does collaboration mean and what that looks like. But I love that piece of, you know, pooling those resources and that using the individuals to be a part of our process in this, that if we're going to address a group, a particular demographic, then they have to be working in this arena with us. There's nothing about us without us. That is a guiding phrase that we have included in all the work that we do, and is a key piece to the work of Coalition. So I love that you bring all of those things, and we hope that throughout the conversation here today, we're going to bring in some other ideas of what that community organizing can look like, and how we can use that to really continue to build up that rapport, to build up the partnership, to build up all of the things that will help us to meet and reach the success of what we're trying to do. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we all have the same mission of creating that positive environment so that our community can continue to thrive, so that our community can be safe and away from the substances, so we can provide those resources. So today, we'll hopefully give you some other ideas of how this can happen, because it's not easy. Community organizing is not easy. Prevention is not easy. It takes a lot, and it takes all of us to be a part of that process. So we're going to kick off the first part, and that is, how do we assess the needs of our community, and how do we identify those priorities around behavioral health? So as we mentioned, everything that we do is guided through that strategic prevention framework. And as we move in, this begins with the assessment and capacity sections. So while, you know, we're ready to move into getting the partnerships and the capacity so we can create some plans, we still have to go back a little bit to gather some additional information and some of the data pieces to help us to bridge some of the gaps, to build some relationships, and to really be able to have a team approach as we're addressing the issues that we're seeing. We're going to be much more successful if we're working together, that as we're having, you know, consistency in messaging, consistency in that communication, and to be able to really see everybody moving in the same direction. So as we, mentioned that strategic prevention framework, it really guides the work around the strategies that we do. It's helping to understand and identify where the prevalence and patterns are in the problems. It helps us to identify those issues and factors that contribute to what we're seeing. It helps us to identify the resources and the gaps. It also helps us as we move forward to look at what are those evidence-based approaches and research informed strategies that we can look at that will give us that change that we're hoping to see. Because I know many of you, this is one thing about prevention is we see where the issues are and they're huge. And then we look at, well, how much funding do we get to address those issues? Not quite as huge as the issues that exist out there, right? So the key thing for us is to really be able to focus in on the things that are most likely to see success, because we don't have the time to try things out. We need things that are going to be shown to be those proven and effective approaches. And so that's how, with that strategic prevention framework, it helps guide us through that process. And then that evaluation, so that we make sure that things are moving along smoothly. If things are not working, it may not be that the strategy is not a good fit. It may have been that other things have happened along the way. Things got derailed, timelines were offset, or some situations came up that were outside of our control. Here in Florida, one of the things that we can't control is our weather, and we have a time in our season that we have things like those hurricanes and tropical storms, and those can sometimes shift some of our plans. So taking into account those things are really important. And it also helps us to inform, maybe next time when we have like a big event or training, we don't schedule them during certain times of our year so that we don't have to keep rescheduling. So looking at how do we understand those norms and priorities of our community? It's not looking at just one data point. It's not looking at just talking to one partner. It's a lot larger than that. And we have so much great technology out there now that we can really inform the amazing understanding that we can get about a community. The more we understand, the better we can do about addressing the issues that we see. So as we go through, and some of this may be familiar to you all if you have taken some the courses through SAMHSA and about the process through which we apply that strategic prevention framework. And so this is just showing you that consistency. It's understanding the nature and extent of the issues within your community. It's looking at what are those things that are having an influence on those issues, so those risk and protective factors, and that's moving through to identifying what resources do we already have, where's that readiness, how do we use that to then address the problems we've identified. So all of this moves hand in hand, and we need to have that understanding to be able to move to that next phase of implementing something. So the key components of kind of looking at understanding the norms of your community comes with understanding that community description. It also comes with understanding community history. There is so much wealth of knowledge and understanding about what has influenced a particular community, whether you're talking about a geographic area, whether you're talking about subpopulation, whether you're talking about any specific groups. Understanding the history and the description of them helps then to understand more of the context of what are the things that are going on, what are those barriers, and what are those challenges and struggles. And then it's looking at what are those needs? What is it that our data is revealing? What is the information our stakeholders are sharing back with us? And then what do we have in place? Sometimes we do have resources, but one thing we find out is not everybody is aware that those resources exist. And so that plays a key role in this as well. And then that leads us to help move forward in identifying what is our problem of focus, what are our goal statements, how we're going to move forward. So I'm going to go into a couple of into each of these sections and talk a little bit more about how do we use our arena of today to help understand more of the community, to help understand more of the history, to look at what those needs are, so then we can take that next step of creating that change. So when we talk about the community description, it's looking and describing at the community as the geographic components of it. So are we talking about a community that's very rural or urban, or is it a mixture? Are we talking about the places that have a lot of resources, not a lot of resources? What do those demographics look like? And then also the questions of, has that changed over time? One of the things that we feel that the the year of 2020 really taught us is that things can change from one day to the next. One day we were having a normal day, the next day we had orders to stay at home. So if things like that can change in an instant, then over time we know things will change. We know patterns of population trends will change. We know the areas of focus can change. So when you're looking at your demographics, make sure you're also looking at not just right now, here today, but over time so that you get a better understanding. And then you have to really define what it is your community that a focus is, whether you're talking about a specific place, if you're talking about a specific subpopulation, what is that description of your community? And are there communities within your community? Helping understand all of those pieces are really important to better understanding what's happening and maybe why that is happening to then inform the next steps. So as you're going through, and this session is talking about community mobilizing and organizing. Why do we need all of this? Well, you need all this because you need to come prepared to the table. So before you approach new partners, organizations, individuals, know what information is already there available. There is so much out there, thanks to technology, that you can learn a lot before you even get to the table. The more you know and bring to the table, it helps to build up some of that rapport that you took the time to understand and learn about your community. There's a lot of information online. Now, granted, there's a lot of information online that isn't all accurate, but you need to know what are some of those things that you're seeing. It's important to learn some of the values before you get there. Learn some of those points of pride. What is that community known for? What are those things that really stand out for describing that particular community? And one of the things that we do have accessible to us is technology. We recommend always checking out social posts. Now, granted, there's a lot of misinformation that can happen. But there's also a lot of information that you can take in for what are some of the themes that you're seeing as an issue. What are some of the things that folks are sharing about those barriers, those challenges. We have a couple of our communities that they often go to a page, what they call the rants and raves, because there's so much information in there from the community, those individuals typing in of the things that are frustrating, the things that are bothering them, the things that you need to know as you're building and bridging those partnerships. Because if you know there are these certain issues that are being shared out by the community, that frustration is happening because they've seen paramedicine having to show up at schools constantly because kids bring in gummies. You need to know about that. They don't always show up in the news because not everybody wants to publicize, but you'll see them in places like this. It's also important to identify some of the city leaders, both the official, those that have a position, but then also the unofficial. Who are those gatekeepers in your community that can really help to tell you and share with you about what does that community look like? Look at those city pages. There's so much wealth of information that you can learn as you go through. Embrace that virtual arena. Right now, you can get on there and find information pretty quickly. Sometimes you find information that counters the information you already found, but it's important for you to have those readily available as you're moving through and working with the community. You'll find things there that maybe you didn't know were a part of that community in understanding, or you didn't know those things were an issue. So I put a couple of examples here. One is going to a website about a community that describes the cities and the towns, and it's definitely a way to understand what is what are those communities proud of? What are the things that they see as their go-to and the things that they value? You can also go see some social media posts. You'll see some news that gets shown across like Facebook, things like that. That helps to kind of understand some of those issues that are coming. There may not be, things that are in a recent needs assessment, or they may not be the things that are, discussed at community meetings, but these are things that are happening and they're showing up in different places. So part of what we do in gathering the data is looking through those sites, whether it's a website, whether it's social media, find out those information, look at those comments. It's amazing what you can find out about some of the issues that are coming up. And if you're more prepared, when you go to some of these meetings, when you're beginning and embracing the collaboration, the fact that you're showing up with an understanding really goes a long way. So Those same things apply for the history of it. Understanding your community's history is very critical. It helps to really showcase what are the things that have happened in the community that maybe have had an impact on why you're seeing some of those issues coming up with the data. That, whether it's some of the norms, those belief systems, the way of life, looking at the things that have an impact on the issues that have that generational impact. Maybe it relates to employment. And you're like, well, we're talking about substance use. Why would employment be an issue? Well, we think about some of these communities where they've had large companies that have shut down and unemployment soars. Those things have a trickle effect down to substance use and mental health issues. So understanding what are some of those things that have happened along the way helps to understand the context of what is going on in that community that you need to know about, so that as you move forward in trying to work with them, those are things that you can be sensitive about. We want to make sure that we're always understanding and being intentional in those conversations and communications. So again, being prepared, finding those gatekeepers, who knows this history, the ins and outs. This is also where you will find out information that's not written in some of those websites or social media posts. Maybe this is where you find out, why do some of the community partners not partner together? Can be tensions that could have come from years before. You need to know these things as you're building up, because you have to find a way to maneuver through them. And getting multiple perspectives is really important. What you will learn from your partners from law enforcement is going to be different from what you will learn from your partners in maybe the school setting, which will be different from your partners that are the behavioral health providers. Get those different perspectives to really understand what's been happening, why it's been happening. So then you can really better plan on what are those next steps to build up that capacity. And in that process, doing some of the qualitative data gathering is really important. This is where understanding that history and the geography and kind of the description, you will get some really great details through focus groups, those key informant interviews, the community feedback, open-ended surveys, and even the staff feedback. You have some staff from organizations that have been working in the community that you're trying to build up the momentum and build up that engagement. Learn from them. Find out. It doesn't ever have to be all the surveys that are done with the graphs and charts. It's talking to people and gathering that information about what's happening and what does that look like. Which then I would prompts the question as to you all in this arena here. How do you get that community input to help inform more about your community? So if you could take a moment and type into the chat. Again, this is an opportunity for all of us to learn from each other. We've got ways that we've been able to get community input, but you probably have a lot of ways as well. And so sharing along this way, that's how we build up.
Survey or community outreach town hall meetings by asking their coalition, drop-in meetings, surveys, listening sessions, one-on-one meetings with citizens of the community, coalition meetings, focus groups, surveys, key informant interviews, community member interviews, more surveys, tabling events in the community, social media, Facebook groups, key informants, local barber shops, meeting with community partners who work with target populations, more coalition meetings, collaboration of stakeholders, resources, lunch and learns. See if I missed any.
The only other one I've seen is school and parent focus groups, or focus sessions, sorry, focus sessions.
Well, that's fantastic. And I love hearing that you're getting that feedback at those coalition meetings and having those opportunities for the lunch and learns. But I really also love that some of you are going outside of just the meetings with your usual partners. You're going into the barber shops. And I think I just saw somebody at the cigar stores. Was that a comment? Those are ways where you're going to get some of those perspectives that are not showing up in your meetings. The meetings are great, and you're going to hear a wealth of information from those that are working out in the community, from your partners, from the lunch and learns. But sometimes it's these other non-traditional settings of like the barber shops and the cigar stores and other places that these are individuals that maybe are not going to the meetings, but they have a wealth of information, and you can get into understanding that local piece of history, that local description, and that is valuable. And I love it. And I love those that are finding those unique ways to reach out. That's fantastic. And so, and that's kind of what we share out here, is that this is an opportunity to really think about, how do you get outside the box? How do you get information in places that haven't been showing up? And so those unique places of, where community convenes, whether it's a skate park, whether it's places that they do potluck dinners on the weekends, whether it's, any place that usually doesn't have these kinds of focuses. And then there's also your virtual arena. There's a lot of great information that's happening on the social side, on that virtual environment. And so if you're able to gather that information, sometimes you're able to gather quite a bit in a setting that it's easy to set up, it's adjustable and accommodatable to people's schedules. It's a great opportunity to really weave that in. And sometimes, the meeting after the meeting, it's amazing what you can get from those opportunities, because yes, you'll get to a meeting and people share open discussion, but then you always know that when someone gets like those little expressions in their face, they have something to share, but maybe they're not ready to share in that larger meeting. Maybe that's the person or the organization that you want to say, hey, would you like to get coffee after the meeting? Or you want to go do lunch? Or do you have a few minutes so we can chat? You'll get some great information in the after the meeting. Things that they may not want to share out loud, but it's valuable for you. Even if it's not something you can put into a report, it gives you the context and helps you to understand kind of where we are with this. So I think that's a very important piece here. And as things are changing over time, finding where are those nuances of reaching the community is really important. My PowerPoint just shut down on me for a second, but hopefully it's coming right back up. I apologize for that. See, with technology, you can plan all the best things and then things work out fantastically, and then all of a sudden there are glitches, but it's okay. That is how we learn how to move and navigate and pivot. No matter what technology wants to do, we can still make sure that we're rolling with it. I'm going to reshare the screen. Please let me know if you can now see the screen.
We can see it.
Okay, perfect. Go figure.
Now it went black.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. Well, yeah, technology. So I want to share, ways that you could use technology, but again, you got to be careful with and coming up with some backup plans should it not want to cooperate. So embracing those talks is very important to building up the momentum, building up the connection. People may not be ready to collaborate quite yet, or to get into a place of even just coordinating, but after conversations over time, you build up that rapport and you find new ways. Doing the meeting after the meeting, hosting maybe even some virtual focus groups. Another great way is, and I think a couple of folks typed in there of the social media, is getting input. Post a question online, especially if you have your organization, your coalition has followers. Post some of the questions. It doesn't have to be long. It can be just one question. You will get some great input. Now, you also get some really wonky things sometimes. So it's about, piecing out the valuable information that helps inform what it is that you're wanting to learn. But you might get information here from individuals that are a real big part of your community, but they're not maybe showing up to the meetings that you're hosting. But this way you're getting a part of that information that is still very important for you to know about, learn about, and inform. So hopefully, it's kind of funny that technology keeps stopping on me here today, because I do want to bring up one of the things about where we are today in our world is there's so much out there that can help with our understanding to pull in information. Many of the meetings that we are in these days have had options to continue on with that virtual arena, or some of them have continued on with virtual because that's the only way that they can get representation of all of those key partners. Some communities are very broad and spread out, so travel time becomes an issue. So virtuals continue to be a way that people connect. Time also causes an issue for doing things like focus groups. So the virtual arena now has that opportunity to, get over some of those different types of barriers. And now they have such great tools that can help. I don't know about you all, but taking minutes is one of my worst. I am just not good at it because I keep wanting to talk because we are having conversation and you don't capture everything. And some of that is really important information. And you're after the meeting going, there's something really good that was said. What was it? Because I wasn't writing down. But with some of this technology that's available out there, it helps to capture all that information. So you don't have to, forget about the engaging part, stopping and writing. You can use that. And with these different tools, it also helps to help identify patterns and themes of what information is being shared on there. This is one example. We use the Otter AI quite a bit for our meetings. We started using it as a great way for, taking meeting minutes, but it also helps us as we're looking at themes of what are the issues that come up, what are the types of ideas or concerns, by having this system help pull those things in to look at patterns that we may not have identified. There's a ton of different AI tools. This is another example, Fathom, that also helps to pull in information and have, all of that fully transcribed so that you can go back in and then pull out key information about what it is that was discussed in those meeting minutes. In those meetings, and what are the themes that have come up to help guide those next steps. So wanted to share this out with some of you. And I think somebody typed into the chat that they also use those AI tools. That Zoom has the AI feature in there, and it's been very valuable. And one of the ways that we've seen success with this is for doing like the focus groups. When you have focus groups in some of the virtual setting, you have people talking and a lot of information flying, but you want to also be facilitating. This helps to pull in that information, and a lot of these AI tools can distinguish different voices, so they can piece those pieces of information in by that. And so as we continue on with gathering information, relying on some of these new things that have been developed, keeping in mind that it's not all perfect. And that's why we still need the people part of going back and looking at the information and still having someone to do some hand note taking so that we can make sure. But as we go through and understanding your community, who is your community, who's making up your community, the history, what's influence, then it's moving into understanding the needs. You'll get different descriptions of what those needs are when you talk to different partners. Everybody comes with their different focus areas and who they serve and what they're into for their particular organization. But it's up to us to then go in and say, what is that bigger picture about? What are those consequences, those consumption indicators and the contributing factors, looking at different tools to gather that information so that we can decipher that picture, looking at those patterns of change and different trends of use, looking at different hotspots, things that are coming up. What are the things that you're anticipating to change? If you have new policy that's going to be coming down, looking at where are we in that? Are we seeing the changes that policy is addressing or not? Looking at your data and taking them and placing them all on top of each other, kind of like a layering effect. So you can see, this is what we're seeing when it comes to maybe overdoses. Here's what we're seeing where we're distributing resources like Narcan. Here's where we're seeing information where training is happening. This is where all of that stuff laid on top will help you to pinpoint where some of those issues are happening and giving that information that opportunity to look at what's happening. This context also helps us to, not say we can come up to a definitive conclusion, but helps us to know the who, the where, the why, and also examine the what is happening. And now, as we're talking about building that momentum in the today world, we are very woven into technology and what that looks like. So we're now into a sea of dashboards. I don't know about you all, but it seems like every time I turn around, someone's got a dashboard, which is fantastic. But that means there's more ways that we can gather information. So this is a time that we are seeing information at our fingertips like no other time. Now, not everything is real time. So some of it is information from maybe a year or 2 years ago, but it still gives us good information to then have those other follow-up conversations. So we want to kind of hear from you all. What are your go-to dashboards? Where do you pull out information when you want to know about your community, especially if you want to dig a little deeper into which ones are for your specific subpopulation? Are we seeing some of the comments coming through?
We haven't gotten any yet.
Okay. Well, I'll give people a little bit of time to kind of think about, because again, one of the things we want to do here is be able to share with, there are dashboards that we know of, but also we work within Florida. So we have a lot of Florida dashboards. And on here, we've got individuals from other states as well. So if you can share, oh, I see, we got some health departments with dashboards that you're using. That's fantastic. Credible Mind, excellent, that's a fantastic one. So as people are thinking, I'm going to share a couple of them. These are ones that can be looked at for various different states. So you can look at information from CDC, census data has the census data recently has added so many new features to their online dashboards with mapping features, information that you can drill down to the census tract. We've got the NISTA data, the information that SAMHSA looks at for state descriptions of what's happening. Community Commons is another amazing dashboard that has so much information related to all different kinds of areas within a community, not just behavioral health related. And then you've got mental health that you can look at for the state and county information. And then the Recovery Ecosystem Index is so interesting. That dashboard can give you some really good information about what that recovery looks like at your state level and county level. And it does not, that's not just for Florida, it's across a national level. So I highly recommend, if you're looking and understanding what some of those needs are for your community, these are some great online pieces. And like I said at the beginning, the more information you can pull as you're beginning these conversations to build rapport, to build momentum, that's going to help a lot into showing that you already did your research and trying to learn more about that partner you're engaging in. These are some of the ones that we use in Florida that give us some really good information. We also look at that Department of Health with our Florida charts. We have reports that we have from our youth survey. Our poison control has an incredible dashboard that you can filter in by different calls and age population. Our University of Florida has a system that looks at the overdose deaths as well as the prescribing health rankings, which is actually not just for Florida, other places, but it gives great information for multiple indicators. So the more you have an understanding of what's happening at your community, the better you can then figure out where else can we go from there. Because getting that full picture is so critical. If you don't have that full picture understanding, it's going to be really hard to address what's happening and being able to address it in a way to see those successful outcomes come from strategies you implement. So there's online data you look at, your local partners connecting, both the qualitative and quantitative pieces. And then there's also visual scanning. I know many of you that are here with coalitions are very familiar with environmental scans. It is a great way to gather information and data that gives an understanding of what are we seeing out in the community. The environmental scan is an opportunity to examine and report on marketing. We look at different substances, including the Delta products, alcohol, CBD, kratom, tobacco, vaping, and other things that are being promoted. We also look at ways to help identify practices to have that potential influence on underage drinking, promoting substance use, encouraging excessive drinking or excessive consumption of substances. That gives us a really good understanding about those barriers that our communities are facing. Is if our role is to create a safer and healthier community for everyone to thrive in, then we need to go with understanding what is our community up against. And the more we have that understanding, the better it is. Plus, sometimes we try to approach partners that say, well, we don't really have much of an issue here in our community. Well, if you come to the table prepared, this way you can show, here's some things we're hearing from parents, or here's some things that we're hearing from our youth, our young people. Here are the things that we are seeing in our community setting. For example, one of the things that we look at for alcohol is, what are the new things that are happening? What are the new displays? What are the new products that are out there? One of the new products that we're seeing big pushes on are those mini bottles. And so having visuals like this, being able to document that and bringing it back to the partners, working with those businesses that we work with, working with maybe some ordinances, whatever that may be. Without this information, they're saying, well, how do you know that's a problem here? Well, this is what we are able to find when we do these environmental scans of looking at these mini bottles that are coming in with alcohol content higher than 14%, easily accessible and available. And according to some of the owners of these establishments, we hear that it's one of the things that are most stolen from, because they're small and they fit inside pockets. So if we come back with information like this, it helps to build up also that conversation. Also with Delta products, now that's the other thing that we've been able to do to build up momentum in our state, is we've gone out, we've done these scans, we've found all of these types of products available. And when all of this was evolving, our state didn't have any parameters in place, not age, not advertisement, not anything. But because our coalitions came together, we pulled information, we did these scans, we were able to meet with policymakers to say, hey, these dangerous substances are out there and there's no age restriction. So you could be 15, walk into a store and buy these things. So when we talk about organizing, it's gathering information consistently across the board, pulling it together, unifying, and then taking it up to where that decision is going to be made. And that's with the policymakers. So we just wanted to give you a couple of examples. In session 2, we'll give you more of those concrete examples at that local community level, but we wanted to share these out. And then that brings us to the community resources piece. And I'm going to have Nancy start sharing a little bit here so she can give you her perspective and give you another voice to listen to.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathleen. So moving on and focusing on those positive consequences and behaviors and protective factors, we know that protective factors are environments, support, and behaviors that act opposite to a risk factor. The more protective factors that are present, the less likely a person is to develop either a mental health or a substance use disorder. And so we want to assist our communities in building up those protective factors at all times. And if we move on to the next slide, Kathleen. It all popped up. It was supposed to be animated, but you know, there's always gaps in our local resources. I sit in a rural community, and so, you know, individuals trying to get to a Boys and Girls Club, for example, or getting to a YMCA is not possible. Sometimes there's not after school program. Transportation is an issue. So it's important that we look and we analyze and we ask these questions. So I'm going to ask you quickly in the chat box if you could share some of your experiences in the gaps in resources based on the questions that are on the screen.
Hey, Nancy, will you please repeat that question?
Yes, I wanted people to identify any gaps in resources based on the 3 questions that are on the screen. So what is already in place locally? Are there funding supports? And then are there resource guides or websites? So you don't have to answer all 3, but just to give me an idea what is available in your areas. And while people are doing that,
is it huge gap for our community? Somebody reported out.
awesome.
Another for transportation, access to services. Transportation.
Yes.
Resource guides. Affordable housing.
Mm.
I feel like that's a crisis across the United States.
Absolutely.
Mental health care services, leadership's lack of knowledge on these issues, safe
That's
spaces for teens. See what I missed. They were coming in quickly.
Good.
Let's see.
We'll take two more and then we'll move on just for time.
Internet services. That's
Oh,
a
yeah.
big one for like rural areas. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was joking with Amber when we were doing technology tech. I said, I live in Ocala, Florida, but we call it SoCala. So I'm going to turn my camera off because sometimes the internet is unstable. But one of the things I wanted to share in this opportunity as coalitions, and it's also part of the CACA model, we do what's called a resource assessment worksheet. And so when you're doing your resource assessment worksheet, we break it down into domains. And if you've had the opportunity to also take the SEPS class, this is also an activity that we do in SEPS class. So you look at what the fiscal resource is. And so when we think of fiscal, we always think of the money and the grants that we receive. But fiscal is just not that. It's also the in-kind. It's also hardware, software, meeting space, or food donation. And then you look at the human resource side of it. And so those are the individuals that could help you in the field of prevention. So maybe someone who has a particular credential or experience or an expertise in that area to assist, and moving outside of the box. And who else do we need at the table, not other than just individuals in the prevention field? And then when we look at organizational resources, that is a broad and general term for the structure within the organization. So we look at policies and procedures. In Putnam County, we are working with local government about park signage, about not vaping in the parks, nicotine products, marijuana use, and even alcohol. And so when you look at the resources, think about those three main categories and how they fit in. So let's move on to the next slide, Kathleen. And so based on what Kathleen has shared, you're seeing how all these dots connect. And so gathering the data is going to drive what we do. It's going to give that picture. It's going to identify the challenges, the barriers, the gaps. Also, it's going to identify those resources. So that worksheet that I mentioned to you in the previous slide is something that we do every time we do a comprehensive needs assessment in a community. And that helps to bring all the organizations together and to also learn about what they have. And having that input from the community, and Kathleen talked about different examples. And so listening sessions, town halls, your coalition meetings, your surveys, the quantitative and qualitative data is very important. And then forming those connections and the buy-in. And so as I said earlier, I've been in the coalition world since 2010. When I first started, I knew nothing about drug coalitions. And it wasn't until 5 or 6 years later that Kathleen and Lisa Jones, who was on here, gave a SAPS training. And then it was like, I understand the SPIF process. In my career since then, I was able to start a heroin opioid task force, a substance abuse task force. And, we just started a coalition in Putnam. Every time I go through the process, I learn something new and how it gets easier. Trust me, guys, it gets easier. It's a lot of information, but it does get easier. So let's move to the next slide. And so again, this just ties back into getting the full picture and getting directions. And even after we complete a needs assessment, sometimes we go back and I review them and I say, wow, I wish I would have explored this area a little more. Maybe we should do a focus group, or maybe we need youth in this age level, or maybe we need to reach, the homeschool kids, whatever it may be. So it's a living, breathing document, but all these things help you. Online data, that's a new thing in my career, where Kathleen was sharing sometimes those messages and the visuals that you're getting and how people are being bombarded. The qualitative data helps put that picture. The pictures that Kathleen shared with you when we do environmental scans, again, for individuals to actually see and to learn, is also another great way for you to include. And then, of course, getting the information from your local partners. Many times they have access to data that we may not have access to. So let's move on to the next slide. And so when we're talking about a problem statement, so the problem statement is going to clearly state which drug for us as coalition is going to be addressed in our logic model. We do logic models. And so people either love or hate logic models, but it is our roadmap. It is how we drive the work that we do. And so moving on to the next slide, you know, when you complete a community assessment, it's important that you conclude with a concise problem or goal statement. The variety of data collection that happens during the community needs assessment can lead sometimes to disagreements and what should be prioritized. Also, community problems become the coalition goals when the problem occurs too frequently. So you're looking at the frequency. Sometimes the problem has lasted too long. So you look at the duration. The problem affects many people. So the scope. And then the problem is particularly disturbing or it's intense in its severity. The problem deprives people of basic legal or human rights that are socially important. So in Marin County, with the Heroin and Opioid Task Force, before it started, the mayor came to the coalition in 2016 and said, our overdoses have increased from 28 to 97, and I don't want it to continue to increase. We need to do something about it. Right away, we had buy-in. The mayor brought individuals behind him, and that definitely assisted what we needed to do. And so the roadmap that you see on the screen, who has used Waze or Google Maps? Just raise your hands, yes or no. Yes. And can somebody tell me why you use Waze or Google Maps? What does it provide to you?
Navigation.
Absolutely, yes.
Direction, guidance, we're seeing in the chat.
Awesome.
You can see the traffic, problem areas, what to avoid.
Yes. Absolutely.
When to slow down.
When to slow down. When there's police. Good tip. So just like Google Maps and Waze, our roadmap guides us on how we're going to intervene. It makes sense. Kathleen, the slide keeps going back and forth. Just FYI. So the top box, you see problems and related behaviors. We would have done that in our needs assessment process. It's important that we always identify the risks and protective factors. And then the last thing that you do is, you know, what evidence-based practices or interventions we're going to put. In relation to problems and related behaviors, some people call that consequences and consumption. When you look at the risk and protective factors, some individuals know that as intervening variables and contributing factors. And then of course, evidence-based interventions are also known as intervention or strategies. For us as coalitions, we do environmental strategies. And environmental strategies is population change. And so the best example that I like to use is click it or ticket. Wherever you go in the United States, you know what that means and how the campaign works and what the consequences are. So when we give our message, when we're presenting, we have to be just as clear as click it or ticket. Let's move on to the next slide. So capacity. So there are two things that relates to capacity, and these are so important in our factors to know. So we're talking about readiness when we talk about when we're assessing capacity. In addition to that, it's important that when we assess for capacity, and as coalitions, we're constantly building capacity with individuals. Capacity also involves the assessment of a community's capacity as well as building of its capacity. And it also includes resources and readiness. So we talked briefly about the resources in the worksheet and why it's important to identify those. Assessing and building community readiness to address the issues identified in the assessment and the resources that are already and that it still requires to address the problem and the risk and protective factors. So again, we cannot dismiss capacity. And for me, in my experience, every time there's an election year, You're having to re-educate those elected officials, be it in law enforcement, in politics, or your superintendent, however it may be. So again, think about resources and readiness. Let's go to the next slide, Kathleen. And so again, when we look at our logic model, oh, sorry, the slides are different on my end. Moving on to our logic model, the work that we do in coalitions and the logic model, the community assessment process, everything that we do, you should include the sector representative. This is also a CACA model. We have included a peer on there because, as we know, the work of peers definitely has grown over the years, and their experience, their lived experience is so valuable. And so at the table, you always want to have minimally these individuals. And sometimes that is difficult and you have to be creative, but it gives you a lot of great feedback and information about the community. But also it's very grassroots. They also open a lot of doors and opportunities. So knowing who the gatekeepers are in a particular community, for me in my community in Marion County, Florida, when we were going to work with the migrant families, Chaplain Bob had a ministry with all the horse farms. We are horse country here in Ocala, Florida, and he was my gatekeeper to open it. And I had to build a trust, not just of Chaplain Bob, but the mothers I learned of that particular community either dictated if you were accepted or not accepted to provide services. So those are things that when you're doing your assessment and getting to know your community, you need to also figure out those places of interest, those subcultures. Let's go to the next slide, Kathleen. All right, so community readiness, as you see on the screen, how ready is a community to accept that there is a problem? Many times individuals say, not here, not my child, not my school. Also, how ready is the community to take action to change the problem? So in Putnam County, Florida, they approached Kathleen in 2023. They had a behavioral health forum representing about 30 different individuals and maybe about 25 different organizations. And they said, we want to start a prevention coalition. And so they invited us to provide technical assistance to them and to help them. They were ready. They came to us. It's been beautiful to see the difference in other communities where I've gone in, where we want to start a coalition and they're not ready. And so again, when you have that readiness, for me, in my personal experience, it definitely has opened more doors and just made the situation much easier. Kathleen, next slide. And so building capacity involves, increasing those resources, improving readiness, and we're going to go into more detail on how you raise awareness. Also, anytime we're doing anything, we have to be culturally competent. We also need to take into consideration the education level and what resources family has. If we put everything on the internet and they don't have internet or they don't have a laptop, that may be a barrier. Engaging those interest groups. So in Putnam County, one of the biggest interest groups that who's been very involved and is a mover and shaker is the women's club, which is amazing to me. And so that has also brought opportunity to approach other civic organizations, strengthening collaborative groups and partnerships. For me, this work cannot be effective if we're trying to do it in silo, if we're trying to do it alone. We definitely have to have that spirit of collaboration and partnership because we also need to leverage our resources and also bringing others to the table. Next slide. All right, so here I'm going to turn it back to Ms. Kathleen to close this out.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And I want Nancy kind of share some of those very specific examples that tie back to what we're talking about here, because that's how we're going to be building up that momentum in that community organizing. And I'm sure some of you at the beginning were like, why are we going through a needs assessment, gathering data? I'm ready to mobilize. Well, the mobilizing and engaging and organizing all still requires the data pieces. You need to better know the community you're working with, bringing that information with you to the table to help them also understand that you're there to help and assist with the issues that we're seeing, not just because we thought it would be fun to make a new partner. We're coming with the intention of doing something, creating some kind of change with them, not for them, but with them. Everything is in partnership and making sure that there's nothing about us without us. That phrase, we take that one to heart. And so as we're building momentum, that momentum happens when we're raising awareness and we're also increasing excitement. Not everywhere is that happening. So we have to begin with that awareness piece to make sure that everybody that you're working with, the new partner you're trying to engage with, or partners, that they understand what we're seeing out there and that you're showing multiple different data points to kind of bring it back to that. Because that excitement is going to happen once the awareness is there, and they will want to be able to see that. So as we started off, we would love to hear from you all. How do you raise awareness or excitement, whichever one you want to share out here, but how do you do that in your local community? How do you do that with your partners? How do you increase and how do you raise that awareness? So as you all are typing in there, again, we ask these questions so that we can keep learning from one another. We can share with you what we've seen, but we'd love to hear from you all as well.
Public schools and community events.
Okay, awesome.
Through schools, presentations to kindergarten through 12th grade students.
Right, so we see also newsletters, parent groups, advisory groups, houses of faith. Oh, I love it. Fantastic. And I love that so many of you are in schools.
Can you pose that question again?
Yes. How do you raise awareness in your local community?
I think one of the important ways to raise the awareness is to actually what I don't see a lot in the community. I'm here in DC, is maybe set up a stand with a banner with your organization on it. Maybe just have some waters and some Gatorade and just kind of inform people that, like, we are here. You know, what are your needs? What are some of the things, you know, that, you know, is going on in your household that might not, that's, you know, potentially not making it to the school or not making it to, you know, whatever the council member that is in that town. Like, what are the underlying issues that we may can assist with that you're not being heard in your town hall meeting, et cetera. And I think that will kind of give context, because once you do that, the person, whoever they connected to, they're gonna go and share with their neighbors, you know, whoever's in their network. Like, I saw this stand, this organization, and they was asking me personal questions, and they represent this, and I think you should go and share. And I think that more that people know that someone is advocating to assist them in their struggles, that more people will actually speak up about them, and then others will actually collectively come together that's on the empowering side to make a difference.
I love that. And you make a great point about increasing the awareness, that visibility of your organization. It's going to be very hard for people to come to you if they're not aware that you're out there. And I saw several of the comments there that you raise that awareness through some of the events that are happening, some mailers, handing out at tabling efforts. So that's fantastic, because that when raising awareness, there isn't a one solution piece. It is trying multiple different venues, because we're all getting information from different places. It used to be very easy to, you know, we'll just put a couple of commercials on TV. Everybody sees commercials. Well, times have changed. Many people are not seeing commercials like they used to, because they're moving into streaming, even for some of the radio. There's some places that, well, they're not listening to radio. They're listening to their whatever Spotify accounts or Pandora. So it's trying to find new ways to reach the community. How do we target them to increase awareness? Because if they're not aware, we can't get them to the excitement level. So they need to know about us, but then that way we can make sure we're getting out that information. So I love all these shares, and this is fantastic. And hopefully we can share out some of these comments that are made so that we can keep that information share going. So a couple of the things that we do for creating that awareness and excitement is we partner a lot with Drug Free America Foundation every year to bring the voice of prevention to our state capital in Tallahassee. And we've been doing this over the last few years, I think since I've been here at the Community Coalition Alliance. And every year we add some nuances to it. We went in wearing all red for the color of power. Then we started to be able to really make sure we're all with the same message. And we started a t-shirt contest for our youth so that we can take their voice to the table in Tallahassee. And so that opportunity gives us time throughout the year to get everybody ready and excited. We share out information on a regular basis. We host training opportunities to lead up to the big day. We provide technical assistance, information sheets, tips. We create one-pagers to be able to make sure that we're all on the same page of what we're talking about and what we're bringing to the table. So that's one way that we increase that awareness, because we take what we find at the local level to the state level, so they know what are these barriers and struggles that we're seeing. And that's how we were able to see the change in the regulations around the Delta products. A couple of years ago, we all went to Tallahassee with what we found in those environmental scans, what we're seeing, and that there were no restrictions for age. And so we went up there, we provided that information, and that was the fastest time I've seen policy change. By that July, we had pushed out, it was you had to be 21 to purchase. They had some requirements about the advertising not being, with cartoons targeting young people and those things. So awareness began with us as the coalitions, increasing that amongst ourselves, taking information at what we're finding locally, taking it to the Capitol, increasing the awareness to the policymakers, and then that excitement of being unified together with the same message. We created change that year, and we have continued to do so year after year. So that's one way that we increase that awareness for for all of us in that workforce side. And so we continue to do that, and every year we add to it. So this is how we're gearing up for 2025, making sure we're having opportunities to come together, to share out. We share videos from the last couple of advocacy days that we've done so that we can remember. Part of the excitement is also reminding folks that the excitement was there, right? Because people can get excited for one day and then, other things happen. You have other meetings, you have other priorities, you have other projects. But if we have this opportunity to keep reminding that excitement is still there and that we created change and we can continue to do so, that's how we will get to be able to continue on and increase our capacity to create change. Another way that we create that increase the awareness and move that excitement level is by celebrating. This is something you all can do within the different organizations you work with, and celebrating the wins from your local stakeholders, your partners. It doesn't have to be a huge thing that you celebrate, but every small win, if we don't begin to celebrate, people start to think what they're doing isn't making a difference. So we started this year. We just finished hosting it on December 9th, our first annual Power of Prevention event, where we recognize the champions, the sector champions that are across our state. We opened it up to our coalitions and partners to submit nominations so they could recognize their local level sector, whether it was their law enforcement, their youth, their parents, and then we would review all of the nominees and recognize them at this celebration. So they were able to get up on the stage. They got a glass award with a certificate. On the certificate, it was signed by our director for the Office of Drug Control for Florida, the executive director for Drug Free America Foundation, and myself with the Community Coalition Alliance. So we want to maintain that excitement. We've increased the awareness by sharing out a lot of this information and data, and then working with our workforce to recognize their work, because it's been tremendous. And we have so much more to tackle in 2025. So if we can make these opportunities of celebration, it helps to build that momentum. And you can take this and apply it at that local level. So we celebrated statewide view, but you can also do it at whatever your community is, whether it's a specific city, a county, county, your region, celebrate those wins, because none of us can do this work of prevention alone. In fact, we need other people at the table with us. So this is a great way to also build up that momentum and also recognize amazing work, so that each year we'll be able to recognize that. We also showcased our first Coalition of the Year award that was provided to our coalition from One Voice for Volusia / Flagler Cares. So this was an exciting way to create a new thing that we will be recognizing and doing every year as a new tradition. So we had a plaque with the name of the coalition, and there's many more little slots moving forward. So now we got that momentum going, that our coalitions will look forward to who will be next year's Coalition of the Year. And we're going to talk a lot more about that building momentum with examples in part 2, but I wanted to bring it up here just to tease a little bit of what information is to come in January. We're going to share a little bit more about building that coalition from the ground up that we saw in Putnam County that now has been able to receive the drug-free communities. We're going to talk more about our collaboration with a local coalition of drug-free Duval, our Community Coalition Alliance, our HIDA, and the Department of Transportation in our Jacksonville community. And then we're going to talk about how we're enhancing the workforce with building up that partnership, engagement, and momentum with our National Guard as we continue to provide trainings throughout the year to enhance our workforce. So stay tuned. We hope that this is something that is interesting to you, that you're taking something away from it, but then we'll give you those very concrete examples of this is what that looks like in a local community setting. So we talked about that capacity building to get to that momentum. That requires that resource piece, understanding what you have available there locally. Sometimes you don't even know what you have available locally until you start having those conversations. One thing I could share back with that power prevention, we were gearing up for that. And then we realized, well, there's a lot of things that need to go into creating this event. Who's going to be able to help us with some of the food? Who can help with some of the printing? So by having those ongoing conversations with partners and sharing about why this is important, what are we going to do, we had so many partners to contribute to this that we were really able to pull off a fabulous celebration. And the readiness was there as everybody was ready to celebrate the wins of prevention. We don't always, get the pat on the back or the awards. So we have to make that space for ourselves. And you all can do that in your local community setting. And understanding what, as you do this, is the important piece of infusing those cultural proficiency pieces and elements, understanding what is going on there, looking at the priority populations that you're trying to increase that awareness with, that you're trying to engage with, and that you're trying to strengthen that collaboration. And as you're working towards this, it's really important to look at the example of the iceberg. There's a lot that you see, the things that are those symbols, the things that are the practice, the custom, things that we were able to find online. But then there's also so much that we don't see, some of those values, some of those beliefs, some of those norms. That is why it's so important to continue on those qualitative components of the conversations and gathering of information to really better understand what else is there. Because if not, we might, risk a chance of, breaking up a collaboration or dismissing something that's really valuable to the other partner or organization or population we're trying to work with. And I know many of you probably have seen some examples of this. What do you feel is the risk of only paying attention to what you see versus what might be further in? And it could be, a lesson that you learned as working with some of those communities. What are some things that, have been an issue because we paid attention more to what we visually saw versus what might have been underneath? Missing a target population. Exactly. That's great. Exclusion. Oh, I love it. The adverse childhood experiences. Absolutely. Missing some of those root causes. Exactly. That's why we always have to dig a little bit deeper, look a little further, not rely on just one particular data point, looking at different perspectives, working with different sectors so that you get that bigger picture piece. And that's what helps us also to move forward in that next phase, which is making sure that you are consistent, making sure you have those meaningful engagements. Nobody wants to go to yet another meeting just to meet. I know many of you could probably agree to that. We just have so many meetings. And if we're just going there just because it's a requirement on somebody's grant, eventually you're not going to have a lot of participation. And so you have to make sure that there is a consistency, there is that expectation about when are they going to hear information, what is going to be important, but also making sure that you keep in mind that what's in it for me, what's in it for your partner, your population, your whoever you're engaging with, what is it in collaborating together that is going to bring them something to this table? It's very important that you vocalize that and that it's very clear for them that there is something in it for them to be a part of this work, to collaborate with you, to work with you as you move forward. And there's a couple of tips here that have helped us as we move forward. And one is creating consistency in communication so that they know when people are, whether it's an organization or a partner, whoever you're working with, that there's a way that you're very clear of how often will you be communicating. Because if it comes out that you're only communicating when you have a new grant due, your partnership eventually is going to see through that and say, you just want me when I meet the little checkbox. So you want to have consistency. You want to keep things moving. And you also want to bring something new to the table, make it relevant. If we're talking about the same data points each and every time, eventually people are going to be going, you know, we already learned this. What else is there? And that's also inviting your partners to share. Sometimes if you're having these meetings, it's about giving the floor to a partner to share about, you know, some of the information, whether it's conversations, data points, perspectives from clients, whatever that is. And then setting timelines. If you're going to say this group is going to continue to meet so we can do something, but if you don't specify what are those things that you're going to do and when you're going to do them, eventually someone's going to say, well, are we still just meeting just to meet, or are we going to do something? And then, of course, the big piece of celebrating those wins. Be it small, be it big, be it that you have a new partner, be it that that you were able to have another lunch and learn, you were able to do a training. Those wins are really important because we don't always, you know, get the little pats on the backs. And, you know, our partners, they really like to also get recognized that what they do matters. And you'd have that when you recognize it. And it's really important for that. And as we go through working with these various partners, it's really important when we say you have all the sectors at your table, or you work with the population that you're trying to target, that you don't make it where it's, you have somebody on the team just to check the box. You have someone that is there part of the process in having that input and being able to voice, you know, some of the feedback and things along the way, and making sure that, you know, you have that cultural humility, making sure that you're taking into account, understand, you don't have to know everything. There is nobody that knows everything about every demographic population, subpopulation, subpopulation. So being able to be open and honest to say, can I learn from you? What can I learn from you? That goes a long way. And it's really important to also, you know, the first question, I think, when we asked about what is community mobilizing, community organizing look like, many were saying collaboration. We absolutely want collaboration, but defining what that is different than what is coordination or cooperation or just networking. So making sure when you say collaboration, what does that really look like for you? Is it the engagement, the participation in whatever the effort is, the strategy, a project, whatever that looks like? Sometimes we just need folks that are in the networking piece to help us to connect with other partners. We don't always need everybody at the exact same level. We do need them at different levels, at different times, and at different phases of a project. But making sure that once you have that collaboration, you don't lose that partner. Making sure that, you know, you appreciate what they've done, but also find other ways that they can stay involved and be a part of this. And as you continue to move through, don't forget about that sustainability, because there are things that we work on and we're always in the, you know, we're finishing up the fiscal year, moving into, but making sure from the day start of your fiscal year, you're moving through with how do we keep this kind of thing moving forward. It's building up your capacity, it's creating those partnerships, it's having those celebrations. It's moving all of those things so that we continue to have that happen. And we go through making sure, and it's not about sustaining everything you do. It's just about sustaining the things that seem to be working, the things that seem to be a part of this. And don't forget about the importance of raising awareness of you. And, you know, I leave these questions here, not that we have to go through them, but more of these are things that you should be asking yourselves. How are you sharing out information? And we're not expecting everybody to have, you know, 50-page data brief on what's going on at the local level, but there's still information you can share, and making sure that you're clear and you're consistent and that information's coming out as a regular piece, not just when a grant is due. And making sure you include your community in the work that you do. How do you include them in your voice? How do you also work to build up your capacity? And how do we make all of this happen? We hope that you've learned some things from this information that might help with the work that you're doing. We hope that you will be coming back to join us in January, where we give you a little bit more about what that looks like in that practical setting. And then here are the objectives that we have for the January webinar that's going to give you the examples. And I'll have some of my partners from the 3 examples I gave you joining me here in January. So you'll be hearing not just from me, but from them as well about what this looks like at the local level and what's worked. And of course, nothing goes smoothly. There are always hiccups. We're not saying that this is all done perfectly. We're doing things, we're learning, and we want to share what we've learned along the way. So with that, I don't know if there are any questions, anything else that Amber, you would like me to cover, because I know we're coming up to our time.